Hello, humans. Today, I want to talk about the Russell Brand thing. This is going to be a serious one. Russell Brand, yo, what's up, Cheddarhead? You probably know that Russell is facing incredibly serious allegations. But what I want to talk about is the reaction to those allegations. In case you don't know, a joint investigation by the Sunday Times, the Times and Channel 4's dispatches reports on 5 women who are accusing Russell Brand of sexual assaults and rape between 2006 and 2013. One woman alleges that Russell raped her in his Los Angeles home, and there are maybe medical records to support this allegation. And a second woman alleges that Russell assaulted her when she was 16 and still attending secondary school. A third woman claims that he sexually assaulted her while she worked with him in Los Angeles and threatened to take legal action if she told anyone. A fourth woman alleges Russell sexually assaulted her and was emotionally abusive towards her. And since the story broke, other women have come forward with further allegations. Now, I want to state very clearly that if these allegations are true, the victims deserve justice, and Russell Brand should face any and all legal consequences. Russell has released a video addressing the allegations and categorically refutes them all. But let's move on to the part that I wish to discuss, which was the immediate and sweeping reaction to the allegations. Russell, his management company, Tavistock, would terminate professional ties with him. Russell's tour promoter cut ties with him, and all remaining dates on the bipolarization tour were cancelled. YouTube demonetized Russell's channel, and video sponsors are also cutting ties. Russell's publishers, Pan Macmillan and Bluebird, have announced a pause to the work they do, with Russell printing and selling his books. Charities Russell works with, including Trevi, who help women and people with drug addiction, have announced the end of their association with Brand. The Wanderlust Festival have cancelled what was going to be their headline act. The BBC have pulled their content involving Brand from its TV and radio streaming services. And finally, came to light that the British government have contacted Meta, TikTok, X and Rumble to pressure them into demonetizing Russell's content. I think it's important to note at this point that Russell has not yet been found guilty of any crime. Russell hasn't been arrested and questioned by police, let alone gone through due process involving a fair investigation and trial. And this necessary process hasn't concluded in a guilty verdict. And that is the point I wish to highlight. I've just detailed a sweeping adverse reaction, one that will, guilty or otherwise, irrevocably damage Russell's career, his reputation, and his credibility. This was a reaction that I believe, guilty or not, clearly demonstrates a coordinated agenda between government, corporate interests, and the media. An agenda with a desire to stop the message Russell Brand promotes. That message being one of skepticism towards that same government, that same media, and those same corporations. A message of anti-propaganda, a message of corporate and government transparency, anti-lobbying, anti-corruption, anti-war, pro-free speech, pro-self-autonomy, smaller government, pro-community and anti-globalization. A message calling for systemic change in what most people, including myself, recognise as a broken system that serves the rich and powerful at the expense of ordinary people. I think the sweeping and immediate reaction to these allegations, one involving the government pressure on private companies, demonstrates a targeted political attack. An attack that aims to stop his message and his ideas from growing any further. Innocent until proven guilty is a fundamental principle of criminal law and a fundamental principle of a fair and just society. Innocent until proven guilty is a fundamental principle to protect individual rights, a principle that demands a fair trial, human dignity, equality, and places the burden of proof on the prosecution to be judged by a jury of your peers. Russell Brand is already facing the severe consequences of a guilty man. Everything but the prison sentence. during a time in which his innocence must be assumed until proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I'm not here to defend Russell Brand or condemn the man. That is not my job, nor the point of this presentation. One of the allegations come from a woman who claims to have visited a crisis centre immediately after being assaulted, and there may be medical records to verify this. The report also claims to have text messages, miraculously 10-plus-year-old text messages, that are reportedly verified to have come from Russell's number. Russell has also been very open about his drug abuse and the promiscuity of his younger years. And I've seen YouTube montages put together by those who already see him as guilty, where he grabs at women, squeezing their ass, and grabbing women's heads and forcing lip-to-lip kisses on them. Let's be honest, he was absolutely a complete rascal and often sexually inappropriate during his early career, in front of the cameras. And he's open about it, that's undeniable. It's not exactly a far stretch to think that a sexually forward drug addict might have taken it too far with women behind closed doors, and the authorities have a duty to fully investigate the issue. But there are a few things that trigger skepticism within me. It seems to be a current trend at the moment when anti-government, anti-establishment influencers or personalities come to prominence. Allegations of this kind have a habit of surfacing, and the consequences suffered are severe without first seeing a guilty verdict. Recently, Dan Wootton and Andrew Tate have faced allegations, and despite no guilty verdict, continued calls for their deplatforming are rife. But neither have admitted to or been found guilty of any crimes. In a civilized and just society, you are innocent until proven guilty. Allegations towards Julian Assange are also the prime example of what happens to prominent anti-corporate voices, anti-corruption voices even. Allegations in the Assange instance that are frankly laughable. Meanwhile, the Epstein client list is still kept from the public, despite a guilty verdict being handed to Ghislaine Maxwell, who helped Epstein run his child sex trafficking and blackmail racket. A list that allegedly reads out like a who's who of prominent establishment figures, including British royalty, politicians, and celebrities. British government, without any due process or a guilty verdict, contacted Big Tech to pressure them to act on Russell Brand, but don't apply any pressure to release the Epstein client list. I personally find this extremely alarming. This is a client list involving prominent British political figures and celebrities who may have potentially committed some of the most disgusting crimes imaginable, who aren't embroiled in scandal, who aren't losing their jobs, and who aren't being demonetised or deplatformed like Russell Brand. Now, I'm not stating anyone's guilt or innocence. That's not my job or the purpose of this presentation. I wish to demonstrate the bias, the divide, rules for some and not for others, an unfair, unjust two-tier society where people get treated differently based on their political and cultural leaning. If you are pro-establishment, if you support the current thing, if you deny or stay ignorant to the rampant corruption, there are different rules and different consequences compared to those who choose to speak out against corruption and those who are sceptical of the current thing. You only need to look at what happens to whistleblowers, who by law are supposed to be protected but are more often than not find themselves in prison. For one side, allegations alone are enough to end your career. Allegations alone are enough to get demonetised or deplatformed. Allegations alone are enough to have your name and reputation dragged through the mud. While the other side appear to be a protected class. For example, Hunter Biden and Ezra Miller, one political figure, one celebrity, both of whom face very serious allegations. But they aren't dropped by management or sponsors. They don't lose their jobs. Neither are subjected to media hysteria. Other public figures, for example, Philip Schofield and Hugh Edwards, suffered much less severe consequences for their recent scandals, despite both publicly admitting to their transgressions. That was because they're not anti-establishment personalities. Despite Schofield grooming a child, he somehow ends up with media sympathy. And Hugh Edwards paid a teenager for explicit photos. Yet his content is still on the BBC streaming platforms and could potentially return to work for the BBC. Russell Brand has neither admitted nor been proven guilty of a crime, but has already faced consequences more severe. Why is that? Why is it different? It's because of Russell's different political, cultural and spiritual alignment. Cardi B, who openly admits to drugging and robbing men, still has a monetized YouTube channel. R. Kelly, yeah, that's sex best. He still has a monetized YouTube channel. But Cardi B and R. Kelly don't speak out against political and corporate corruption. They get to earn money. Tucker Carlson has literally done nothing wrong other than speak out about government and corporate corruption. Yet he loses his place at Fox News and faces regular calls to be deplatformed. I think I've made my point. There appears to be different rules based on where a person resides politically and culturally. Clear as day, in my opinion. But before I carry on here, I wish to clarify again, as I feel some people who have stumbled on this streaming video may find parts of what I'm saying triggering, or maybe missing the point I'm trying to make. I'm not discussing Russell Brand's guilt or innocence. I'm trying to demonstrate what I believe to be a coordinated political attack. And I'll get to the motive soon. But his guilt or innocence is irrelevant to my point. For me, a huge red flag that suggests to me that this was an agenda-driven coordinated attack is that these allegations were sought out by the press. The alleged victims didn't come to the press, nor did they contact the authorities. In the report, they state that these alleged victims never came forward. They never told the police, and they had never contacted the press. If these alleged victims had never spoken out before, as stated in the report, that means the investigation was started without any leads. The press, on a hunch, with no leads or allegations, decided to investigate Russell Brand's past. And you need to ask why. This isn't the movies. Police and journalists don't just start investigations on a hunch. This is the real world. They start with a lead or accusation or something of the sort, some evidence that provides a reason to investigate. And from there, they follow the breadcrumbs to develop a more complete picture before finally publishing their findings. That's how it works. They started this investigation without a lead. In other words, they had absolutely no reason to even begin. So why did they start this investigation? To me, that seems obvious. Russell's reach has grown to be much larger than theirs. He routinely points out corruption involving the government, the corporations and the media. The corporations and the media are owned by the same controlling interests, who also happen to be the largest political donors. So they, the controlling interests, use that influence over the media and the government to find or create any scandal so they could shut Russell Brand up. Again, Ghislaine Maxwell has a guilty verdict and courts withholding the client list. That's a lead, one the media are willfully ignoring. It's the story of the century and it's right there and they ignore it. Hunter Biden and President Joe Biden have been accused of crimes involving drugs, illegal firearms, sex trafficking, and selling political influence to the highest bidder. That's a lead to start an investigation. There are so many examples of massive leads with public awareness, corruption and crimes in plain sight, and the media ignore it. There are so many scandals and accusations flying around involving countless celebrities, political figures and corporations, abundant leads that absolutely should be investigated. But they investigate Russell Brand with no leads, ironically proving Russell Brand correct in his assessment of them. The media are not staffed by real journalists. They have no integrity. They can't be trusted. They are nothing but corporate puppets of the establishment, propagandists serving the interests of the rich and powerful, whose function is to control information and create narrative. Now, I'll admit, if Russell turns out to be the prolific sex abuser he's been accused of being, I'll hold my hand up and admit that it was one almighty great hunch. But my point remains. They had no leads. My fucking slide's fucked up. They had no leads. The real reason they had no leads. They had no reason to start this investigation. To me, that screams agenda. The media spent a year on this and wouldn't have stopped until they found something, truthful or otherwise. This is the same media that avoids investigating the rampant corruption within our political class and the corporate interests they serve. They ignore the criminality of the rich and powerful who own it all, and they spend their resources investigating without cause, without leads, one of the few prominent voices who do speak out and who does shine a light on that corruption, Russell Brand. In my opinion, they went after Russell Brand not with the intention to get justice for sexual assault victims. They didn't even know there were any. They went after Russell Brand to find any reason to tangle the man up in scandal, to shut him down, and to halt the spread of his message. That's what I think. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening. And remember, above all else, stay free.